Hey y'all, I'm Carolina Tony. Today the road brings me to Charleston, South Carolina, and we are here on the banks of the Ashley River at Middleton Place Plantation. This is one of the largest plantations in the area. It was built in the early 1700s. Part of the house is still standing, part's gone. I'll include a picture later on in the video of what it actually looked like. But we're going to go inside. Sorry I can't take you with me on that, but we can look around the grounds and look at these beautiful gardens and some of the outbuildings. And we'll do that, but right after this station identification. This is America's oldest formal landscaped garden. We are a few weeks late. A few weeks ago, all these azaleas would have been just blooming in flowers. Middleton Place. This is the residential complex. The house was built in 1705 and it's passed through 3 generations of families ownership before Henry Middleton acquired it by marriage to Mary Williams in 1741. The house was fortuitously aligned with a natural stretch of the Ashley River so that Henry could use the alignment as the main axis of the garden plan. In 1755, 2 flanking buildings were added to the north and south, integrated with a garden design. The north flanker contained a conservatory, a library with some 10,000 volumes, and the south flanker held offices and a gentleman's quarters. The original sketch was drawn from this vantage point by Countess Polana Middleton in 1842. I can't begin to describe to you just how huge this garden is. There are little pathways leading off different directions. Of course, these gardens were built and maintained by the thousands of enslaved people that the Middletons had on this plantation down through the years. And this is called the Sundial Garden, and it's probably because there's a sundial in the middle of it. And all these paths correlate with the quarter hours. If we look at this sundial, it says it's almost 11 o'clock, but we are on daylight savings time, so we're off a little bit. This is called the Middleton Oak. It is estimated to be between 900 and 1,000 years old. It is the largest tree here at Middleton Place. I think this is the Arthur Middleton tomb, 1742 to 1787. He was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. His mother, Mary Williams Middleton, 1721 to 1761. His father, Henry, 1717 to 1784. He was the second president of the First Continental Congress. He's buried at St. James in Goose Creek. This is part of the residential complex at the Middleton Place. It consisted of a central dwelling built in the early 18th century, perhaps as early as 1705, and two detached flankers, a gentleman's guest quarters, a library, music conservatory was built in 1775. After gardens were completed by Henry Middleton, it was later described as the Middleton Place house. The central hallways where we're standing now was used by Henry Middleton as the main access to the gardens. The access extended eastward to the Ashley River and westward to the historic Ashley River. The main house and dependencies were looted and burned by detachment of the 56th North New York Volunteers on February 22, 1865. The central dwelling and the north flanker were completely destroyed and their fragile walls leveled 2 decades later in the great earthquake of 1876. The south flanker was less severely damaged in the Civil War fire, allowing William Middleton to restore it in 1870 and thereby stabilizing its efficiency to survive the great earthquake. The restored south flanker remained a family residence for over a century until it was adaptively reused as a museum. So they're a part of the ruins all the way from that way, where this would have been the central part of the house, over this way. And of course this is the part that they restored in 1870. This is the chapel on Middleton Place Plantation. Records indicate that William Middleton had this mill constructed in 1851 as a functional outbuilding as well as an architectural embellishment to the gardens. It's likely that some damage was done to the... Y'all go ahead, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. It is likely that some damage was done to the building as a result of the occupation by the Union Army in February 1865. For in 1867, Middleton wrote of the need to put a roof on the building and to make it usable as a shelter for harvested crops. For the next decade, the building served as a storage facility. Whether it ever functioned again as a mill is unclear. In the 1880s, the roof was changed to a mansard style. These are just some of the rice fields. They would be flooded just like on the other side of that dam. They said that the female slaves were expected to plant half an acre a day of into rice fields, that the furrows were scratched 10 inches apart, and the female slaves would walk down through the rows and make a hole with their big toe, dropping the seed in and then covering it up with their heel as they walked along. This was originally called the stable yard. During the Civil War, all these buildings were burnt, but they were rebuilt in the 1930s back on the same foundations. And they've used these buildings that were actually part of the stables as an interpretive center, so you can see what colonial life was kind of like. This is the textile shop.
Well, good morning. Hello there.
Hey.
How you doing? Take all the pictures you want. If you want to hear the story, I'll be glad to tell you about it.
Tell me the story.
Okay. I do a craft here called coopering. That maybe you've heard of. A cooper is a woodworker who makes barrels and buckets and things like that. We get pieces of wood to fit around in a circle to form a container. So these are coopered objects that I've made and they're brand new and I'm working on. They once made barrels here primarily for the shipment of rice. Rice is the major crop here. One barrels like the one by the wall, the full-size barrel with the wooden hoops on it. And they did that to save money because rice is a dry product like sugar and tobacco. I do that with mine. Many of these items sold across the way in the open-air garden market.
This is a portion of the slave cemetery at Middleton Place, and they have not done a whole lot of research on exactly where all the slave graves are, but there are a few. They have found tombstones on this slope, and the few that were uncovered, they have removed them to this area. They think that perhaps these particular tombstones belong to John Johnston in 1859 and Edward Brown in 1851. They were put in this location to avoid inadvertent damage. But it's thought that both men were slaves at Middleton Place, as this enslaved list suggests that John Johnston was a house servant, perhaps a butler, and was married to another domestic slave, Elizabeth. In 1846, they had a child, Priscilla, who remained on the plantation throughout the Civil War. Unfortunately, the true identity of Edward Brown is more difficult to ascertain. He died at the young age of 22, which was not unusual for slaves, and available Middleton Place slave lists do not include his name. They do know that Ned Brown was a driver, which is a slave position of importance and responsibility. For Williams Middleton, prior to the Civil War, perhaps Edward Brown was a relative of Ned Brown. This is just how huge this place is. This is the house. All right, well, that's going to do it for our trip to the Middleton Plantation and Gardens. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know a lot of folks have trouble with southern plantations, but we've got to remember that although there was slavery in this country at the time, that these folks contributed to the building of our great country. And I think it's very important that we remember that. We remember where we came from, so we don't make mistakes again. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to tell your family and friends. Share this video with your friends. And for now, y'all have a good day.